you know, can quote unquote Libra season, end quote, be looked at as kind of like running with a parachute against the wind at the start of it? And then once you give it your all, the body, being the mortal that it is, it eventually kind of like has its limits. From those limits, it kind of conjures up the will that it has, and it kind of does something of a quote unquote withdrawal. Within that withdrawal, the pain is paradoxically, as it comes back up from the plummeting of its pain, it turns into a newly found pleasure. Of course, interaction is there. And then within the interaction, we see some type of moving evolution of the elements, respectively: mutable signs, mutable fire, mutable water, mutable air, mutable earth. And within that, there's a need for some type of casual stimulation, because the mutable signs, it's kind of like something of like the current. And within that current, after mutable fire, then we move within the passion of the quote unquote, the seasons. And then after that passion of the seasons, everything is reversed, because on a different level, maybe it's Cap to Sag to Scorp. But since we're mortals, we're coming from the bottom up. So since everything's reversed, it's Cap to Sag. So after Cap is Sag in a dream lens, and after coming out of that esoteric industry, respectively, then there's a different intersection of these games, right? The whole Sag theme. And it's this whole like changing passion amidst the other mutable elements. And then after Sag is going back to see, pretty much where we stand with our esoteric predecessors, Cap. After Cap is Aquarius, seeing, the technology, the ancient technology that is kind of like, it's kind of like in the background, and it's kind of misunderstood. And it's kind of like, Aquarius could be looked at as, you have to have a keen initiation to like really see what the technology is about, human technology, or just, quote unquote UFO technology, end quote. So because the constellations, they don't necessarily have to be individual. The individuals are seasoned by the temperaments of the season of the constellations. And your sun sign is, you're pretty much it's the esoteric weather that's making your genetics mutate how they will, based on the temperament of the season that it's in. So after Aquarius would be Pisces, that would be mutable water. That would be seeing like, the emotional reactions of the higher predecessors, respectively, because they're moving with how they grow amongst each other. For some reason, in this flavor of Pisces within Libra Sun season, I'm getting like Babe and the Pigs, or like some type of like, all of the what do you call that? All of like the litter needs the mom's milk, right? So for some reason, like this particular alignment and aspect within how Pisces could play out amongst Libra Sun is like kind of just seeing like, eventually the litter needs to go back to their mother, right? And then after Pisces, there's going to be like a full moon in Aries. So this is just like the astrological movie that could be happening, from Libra to Aries. And then after Aries is like, the first house also exalts, respectively, low key. Mars is like ruling that area. So like Mars is like kind of like, Mars could express himself in different houses and signs, but when Mars goes back to the first house, this is where he could have originated, or he could have came back from his own fall to his own re-risen hoodness of himself. So Mars has a certain nature of just being naturally Mars. And then when Mars goes in like a different, because obviously we all have that inner Mars, right? And as we all have that inner Mars, we have to like, we could like we could see why we are the way we are, and how it goes out of balance, how the Mars goes out of balance because it's going ambitiously for what it's going for, and how it's being imprinted based on where your Mars is at. So if Mars is in, so on a different astrological level, Mars in the first house, that's him being in his origins, right? It's him going back to like his house, you know, him going resetting, and him kind of like, if Mars were to go first through 12th house and then somehow it goes from 12th to first house, he went on a whole different journey. And as he goes back to that journey, he settles into his like his own quote unquote sovereigntyhood of him going back to the first house, because Mars could express himself in any house in any sign differently, but traditionally Mars could be looked at in the first house as him going back to his like rulership. Mars in the first house. So all of our first house, no matter what, if you it doesn't, you don't have to have Mars there. Your first house, that's where your natural quote unquote feminine Mars is. Your innocent Mars is there because Mars exemplifies and signifies the energies of the first house. So the first house is just seeing the natural Mars, the receptive Mars. So within that receptive Mars, that first house is some type of like completion and embodiment, and within that completion and embodiment, the Mars is there in a different setting of a different esoteric roundtable. So the esoteric roundtable is the first house is kind of something of a completion, but on the surface level, physical level, Mars is the one completing things. He's kind of wrapping everything up, you know. Mars and the Sun, they're kind of wrapping up the whole, respectively, the whole external, physical society reality, respectively. So obviously, this is a raw one. I could see how like someone could judge me, you know, for this raw stuff. So I could just call this one esoteric roundtable, and intuitively tapping into your first house. The first house being the first house exemplifying and signifying qualities of Mars's in rulership there. And since the first house and since the house system is more feminine and yin in nature, your first house is just like how you're kind of magnetizing for your Mars to go towards completion, you know? So your first house, wherever your first house is, the energies that are playing out there, that's what's magnetizing for your Mars to go back to feminine completion, right? Respectively, because the first house, Mars is like the ruler of the first house, but that's like for like a different play, because Mars is kind of like wrapping up this whole surface level play, and he has relationships. Him in himself has his own relationships with all the other planets, but he's more key than we think. And since he's more key than we think, he also has different expressions and combinations and configuralities based on all the different combinations that are possible, you know, because there's different expressions combining with different expressions, right? That's the whole different, there's a whole different context of differentiation. It's how different combinations come to be, you know? So that's the esoteric roundtable type of shit. And obviously, like if I were to do like a written journal, it would come out more different and structured, right? But obviously we have our own individuation and our own fragmentation where we could be out of balance with that, because we could be too polarized with the Mars, and it could obviously have its shadow aspects. And then like Earth is in Aries right now, so the unconscious body is like the Mars self is in the dark, you know, but it's still there. It's femininely, on a feminine nature, it's still there, you know. We're still kind of feeling it, but it's not necessarily, the light is not necessarily being shined upon it because it's unconscious. So since the light's not being shined on that, the shadow work is to go towards like wherever Aries is playing out in your houses, because Earth is in Aries, and where Mars is playing out in your houses. So that's a mini. Take it how you will. Obviously, this is raw. Obviously, people are gonna judge, and but it's okay, you know. Because I'm like, I feel like this is my passion, you know, to kind of just do these intuitive things. And obviously, there's more to be said. And yeah, first house, it's like you know, Mars is the ruler of Aries, and Aries is synonymous with the first house. So Mars has this rulership towards the first house. So since Mars has the rulership towards the first house, we have a unique individuated journey how the Mars could be away from our first house, and on an inner feminine level, it's up to us to bring our Mars back wherever it is on the chart to energetically go back to the first house casually, like on a standard level. And here's another thing, like on a different context, the feminine template, if you're a female, you could naturally be quote unquote undefined and receptive just on a different context, and if you're a male, you could be more defined, but obviously there's different iterations within that, you know, because there's different energies and aspects that color in what makes us defined and undefined. But on a more natural, different level context, we could be like you know, some of us just have a unique type of undefinition, meaning there's open space within our standard template of ourselves that receive the energies, and they recycle the energies how they do in combination with what's defined within us respectively. And obviously there's more to say, you know, within like, you know, the first house dynamic, but I don't know, for some reason I'm just focusing on like the first house. And And for some, and then one of the main points I wanted to also say was like we all have our own individual Mars, but like how that's kind of like how our unconscious is kind of like for some reason we're knocked out of our intelligence, you know, we're knocked out of our critical thinking, and since we're knocked out of our critical thinking and intelligence, we kind of like we don't want to recognize a certain part of ourselves, because we just don't want to do that, you know. And since we don't want to do that, ironically, we won't have a healthy Mars to take us back to completion, because what the healthy Mars does, it takes us back to completion. But what does Mars need to be healthy? It needs to know how you're all of the planets in a different sense on a microcosm level, and how all the planets are in a different, you know, jigsaw configuration, being in a unique, you know, setting of how they're just in a unique time-space dynamic complex setting, and how they're just in a certain place on the astrological clock, you know. And on a standard basic, you know, neutral sense, it's fragmented, you know, because, you know, all the planets aren't in all of the houses and signs, but they are on a microcosm level because we're expressing that completion. So it takes a real sophisticated, advanced interdependency and interaction for these things to work. So I'm just saying it for what it is. And, you know, the power of the 3 is obviously like, that's for you to intuitively tap into, you know. And, yeah, take this video how you will. And then, you know, obviously, the new moon, it's going to see like, you know, how the Libra energy, how that whole like pushing upward, kind of like, you know, kind of pushing against an air current, not good, not bad, just energetically, that pushing against the energy, that air current, that could be playing in a certain 1st through 12th house. And as it's playing through a 1st and 12th house, you could see like, you know, what your feminine body is receiving, kind of, but this is all unconscious, because the light of intelligence, it's not necessarily telling us that this is a thing. And since it's not telling us and we don't know, we're just going to go about things in an unconscious sense. You have the best life ever. And, you know, may like some balanced gods snap us back into the balance despite the distortion. Thank you.